Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview John Grenier, founder and president of JustTech, whose journey from legal services attorney to technology innovator has revolutionized how nonprofit legal aid organizations harness technology to expand access to justice for underserved communities. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm very fortunate to have John Grenier, who is the founder and president of JustTech, on today. And he has a very long and impressive career in this crossover that we have between law and technology. And I'm really excited to explore his career with you because I think it provides a lot of insight as to where we are now at the intersection of law and technology. And there's multiple lessons to learn from him. So with that, John, I'd just like to introduce you and ask you a little bit about what you're doing now.
That's great. Well, Tom, thank you for inviting me to join the podcast. Right now, I guess I'm still knee deep in the work of JustTech. It's been a little bit over a decade since we started the firm. A lot of what we do has its roots in the work that many of us did in legal services before JustTech, and certainly, the rapid changes that are occurring over the last few years, and certainly the broader political environment in the U.S. has really accelerated a lot of different issues and concerns. So it's definitely sometimes I feel like I'm humming a little bit, but I just feel honored to work with the people I get to work with at JustTech and the folks in the legal services community that trust us to be partners with them.
Well, to give everyone who's watching, we're not sure at what time you'll be watching this, but the context is that things are changing. You got the big beautiful bill with potentially like doing away with AI regulation statewide for 10 years. There's also like a defunding of LSC, Legal Services Corporation, that is happening and, disenfranchises a lot of underprivileged people that don't have access to lawyers. And there's a whole slew of other things that we'll be able to get into later. But for the benefit of everyone who may not be familiar with JustTech, if you could tell us a little bit about its mission and what it does.
I think the most immediate origin of JustTech stems from my time at Legal Services NYC. I was brought in as the first CIO for the organization. It's the largest civil legal services provider in the U.S., and it operated as multiple independent entities in many ways, but certainly on a technology front. Well, it was just an amazing opportunity for me to come in. Probably get to a little bit more of my motivation behind this and be a part of building a lot of what I think were sort of amazing new collaborations and systems to better support individual advocates and the organization. And as we did that, we essentially started to do a lot of the work of JustTech, which was to help understand, analyze the needs, research, and select leading products and services to address those needs, and then help implement those systems, build the training around it, the governance around it. And then over time, we started helping other nonprofit legal aid groups from within LISNY. And eventually, it became clear that we needed to go out there and do this on a bigger scale. The need was there, and in some ways, operating a tech startup within a nonprofit legal aid group was a little challenging, at least on an accounting basis. So we have sort of the background of working inside mostly, although I think importantly we have folks who are not from legal aid working at JustTech, but a lot of perspective on the practice of law, on the administration, the compliance, the the grant writing, the reporting needs, but also the engineering, the tech support, the training, project management work that we do. In some of our work, we are basically the outsourced IT department that we initially were at Lisney for large providers and then some smaller providers as well. We really, I think, with the advent of the cloud now, 15, 20 years ago, of it becoming more affordable, it really has. I think that was another major step in making small firms viable. And so I think we've added the services around that to make it work well for firms without IT leadership or management or staff trainers, and then over time we found, not that maybe this was exclusive to Just Tech, but that there was really much more of a need for, I guess, what I'm calling management consulting for the clients we work with, to really help them think through, first of all, sort of help them integrate a technology strategy into their broader strategies, and then think through how they move their organization forward. And a lot of providers receive similar funding, have similar missions, but every organization's origin story, their organic development is different. Their founders are different. And so the culture is different. The practices are different. And so we've been humbled at times in maybe a painful way, or I should say, sort of appreciating some of these subtle differences, but bringing sort of more of a methodical approach to listening, analyzing sort of what's happening in those practice areas, those practice groups, those organizations we work with. And certainly when working with collaborations, where we have multiple firms working together, it's really important, again, for us to understand each partner. And so we've gotten better and better at that, with a lot of, I guess we could say, failures along the way, but hopefully I think more successes. And I think, more humility at, what the challenges are, and without losing our optimism and our appreciation for what's possible. And I think part of that is just driven by the amazing work that our clients now do, and the overwhelming need for them to do that and more. At one point, I used to think of us as like a hospital. You don't need a heart surgeon every day, but when you do, you want to have a really good one. So we try to bring those specialized skills to the extent they're needed to an organization, episodically or on a regular basis, because that's not typically something that law firms are in the business of developing, of recruiting, training, supporting those professionals within their firms.
I mean, I think it's fantastic, and it's extremely well needed, because the customers that you serve, legal services providers, legal aid, they don't necessarily have that, expertise in their tool chest, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have that through your company, and to be able to tackle those thorny issues of IT, of security, of also like building, building software that can help them, is really, really needed. And the fact that you can provide it to them and move them forward, move the whole cause of justice forward, is really great. And I know that you've been at this for about 30 years, right? You've been working in this niche.
Yeah, I'm only what, 38 now. Yes, but yeah, I've been at it. I got bit by the public interest bug in law school, and I was a happy law student. I think maybe half of my class, half of my classmates were pretty happy too, but the other half were pretty unhappy. And I was just really glad that I enjoyed it, because it would be way too hard if I didn't. And getting into the clinical work, that was just so important to my education and my appreciation of what I was learning in the classroom, and also just introduced me to so many wonderful people who were so welcoming and shared their interests, their passions with me. And I got to learn a little bit about the work and their careers. It's something, it's kind of, I wasn't expecting necessarily to be where I'm at right now, but I started out years before in tech in high school, and had, I guess, the systems brain that just wouldn't stop. And so I ended up navigating myself into more full-time tech management positions, even though I loved being a lawyer and representing clients. It was a great a great role, and it's definitely something I miss.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that, because As audience members might know, I love to ask people about their origin stories and how things started out early on. And for you, I know that you're based right now in New York City, right?
I grew up in Manhattan, but I was I guess of the generation where you could roam. So I got it all, got on the subway and buses and my skateboard and bike and explored, skate parks and Shea Stadium and great sandwich shops and pizza shops, all over the place. Yeah, and really loved New York City, loved the people I met at school, generally, not everybody, but there was a lot of complex flavor to New York at the time.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of New York City. I love it. I would love to live there. My wife wouldn't stand it. But I love like the activity and the spirit. And whenever I get a chance to, I head out there.
It's definitely changed. I mean, I think it's funny people talk about the crime rates in big cities. I mean, growing up, there was definitely a lot more crime than there is now, and cars were being broken into constantly. Like you leave anything in your car, 5 minutes later, your windows were smashed and your radio was gone or anything else. And my classmates and I, were always sort of looking over our shoulder about whether we are going to get mugged or something. Yeah, I mean, I think a very safe city. Obviously, no area is crime free, and there's also a real friendliness to it. I mean, I think a lot of people are there because they want to be there. So I think it also has a reputation of being mainly Hollywood, I think, generated reputation of being an unfriendly place. I think there are a lot of wonderful, very giving people in New York too.
Well, tell us about that. Like, what was your what was your childhood like there? What were your parents? What are your parents like?
My parents both worked full time growing up, so I was I guess sort of left more in my adolescence more to my own devices. But in my earlier years, had I guess a woman I call my second mother, who Lenny, who helped raise myself and my sisters. Um, and certainly getting out to the parks and going to see the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Plaza and just walking to and from school. I don't know. It was very very accessible. I guess the non-traditional role in a way that my mother played when I was growing up. I mean, a lot of my friends' moms were home when they got there. I think both impressed me and it sort of impacted me as well. And later on, when she hit a glass ceiling, I don't think we called it that, or I didn't know it was a glass ceiling at work and was forced out. I think that things like that actually kind of impacted me as well. That because my mom was a woman, she was not allowed to continue her ascendance in the fashion industry that she was working in. But also, like having Lenny, as my second mother, and learning about her childhood in Alabama and the environment that she grew up in, and what the challenges were in her life, I think also was very formative. And I went to a parochial school for the first few years, and then a public school, and then a private school. And I kind of learned a lot from all my classmates, and their backgrounds were when I sort of mentioned that New York City, the flavor of New York was more complex. There was a lot more diversity, I think, certainly economic diversity and backgrounds. And I think I learned a lot from obviously, I think from my teachers, but also from my classmates and my neighborhood friends that I would kick around the streets with.
What kind of work did your father do?
He worked in industrial and commercial real estate, and he worked in Queens and Brooklyn, and that's also part of why I kind of got out there. I'd meet up with him, and he had I think also a real love for learning about great places in the city, and so and he's a passionate cook and foodie, and so would take us to places, holes in the wall, wherever he had heard, a good recommendation, heard of a good recommendation before there was Yelp and I think he had a small business, so he was an accidental real estate person who, just I guess felt like he couldn't be hemmed in by working for a large real estate company, and so he had to deal with a lot of the challenges of running a business without a lot of the background for it. But I think did a great job, and was one of my first clients in high school for some of the programming work I did.
Interesting. So, I mean, from your father, it sounds like, maybe some of the influence in terms of entrepreneurialness, like stuff is possible. You could do it yourself. You don't have to necessarily have to go to work for somebody. You can
Hmm.
launch your own business. And then, your mom's experience as, in the fashion industry, she was working in the business world. I take it like,
Yeah,
yeah,
she was working for a company that did a lot of the buying for a lot of the major department stores. Yeah, and she came from a small town in Ohio. I mean, grew up on a farm, and but loved fashion, loved the business, and moved to New York City to follow her dream.
that's great. I mean, I could see how they've influenced you. And also Lenny, like giving you kind of a grounded perspective
Yeah,
on everything. So I'm curious, like based on that, what you ended up pursuing in university. I mean, it's pretty like well optimized for where we are now, but you had a mind for computer science, philosophy, and combining these things together. So connecting the dots, how did you get from what I see as early influences with your parents to like a computer focus?
yeah.
Was it the timing of the time?
Yeah, yeah. I think the timing. My father, I guess, supported my interest in in radio technology, CBs, and other sort of broadcast stuff, and science, and like kits where you build circuits and stuff. And then I'm trying to remember if it was he bought a Sinclair ZX80. But I think I'd actually gotten into, there were a lot of electronic shops in New York, and I had insinuated myself into one in our neighborhood that Atlas Electronics that had a microcomputer, and they let me play with it, and I learned BASIC and just I just loved it, that sort of tangible sort of result of your work, and then Radio Shack started hanging out there with their computers, and then eventually middle school, I landed at a school that had computers, and so I remember my first day at school, I wrote this really silly little basic program to print out my schedule, eight and a half by 11. Well, a dot matrix printer, but like a 8.5 by 11 sheet, so I could have a visual of my schedule. And my dad picked me up from school that day, and anyway, so I was really happy, to continue to be able to play with it and learn, more languages, and then start to think about applications initially for the school I was at, and then for others.
I love this tinkering, right? Like
Yeah,
the fact that more people are able to do that now with so-called vibe coding and create their own stuff. There's nothing like
absolutely.
that.
The rudimentary sort of nature of of the interface between computers and humans, right? With a green terminal screen, or a dot matrix printer versus high quality graphics and a mouse, trackpad sort of interfaces. It's like the computers were much simpler. I mean, you could do machine language programming or assembly programming, and you had very limited amounts of memory, and so you had to be very efficient, so you could do a lot more on your own. You didn't have to do I mean, there wasn't really a lot of opportunity to collaborate, at least within my school, but you could sort of I built my own word processor. I built a few games, and today that would be multiple teams and a lot of different expertise with design and user experience testing and all. So it was just it was all accessible, it was all rather rapid, and yeah. But absolutely, there it was the kind of the geeky kids who hung out and did this stuff, and everybody else, probably thought we were a little strange, and we are.
Well, I was one of those strange kids too. But the other piece of it though is like the philosophy interest. Like, how did that come about?
I started out, my thinking in going to college was, computer science, computer engineering. Well, part of it was as I was taking more of the computer science curriculum, I really found that I was hemmed in by their approach. And I resented, like, I don't know. I mean, I think I still managed to do pretty well grade wise, but I resented losing a few points for some syntax error that, if because you'd write this code, in a book, right? You wouldn't actually do it on a computer. It's like, well, that's what the compiler's for. I would find, like, ideally you write, perfect code from the start, but it's like I wanted folks to appreciate sort of the elegance, the efficiency, not the typos. That didn't matter as much to me. So I think I was a little bit of a bad fit that way. But and so much of this stuff I knew, and so it was not as enjoyable. But the philosophy sort of coursework, felt was just something I did for me. I just when I don't know how I ended up signing up for some philosophy classes, but it was just so enjoyable. I love the way it sort of forced you to think about things. Some of the tutorials, this Professor Penner, I remember at Wisconsin, would give us these really hard assignments, and I don't think any of us ever really got them fully right. But like we would then sit down after, I don't know, about a month of work on each of these assignments, and he would help lead us through our own thinking. And I just really found that fascinating, and really, I think also helpful in terms of my critical thinking skills, and even my appreciation of language. I never took any psychology courses, but sort of understanding sort of some of the roots of I guess of what makes people tick, and how groups work together. But yeah, so I just fell in love with philosophy and economics. I mean, that was sort of another thing. I never really thought much of economics, but I was interested in what made things tick. And to me, economics are a major driving force.
As a philosophy major myself, and having dabbled in BASIC when I was younger, and then now like learning a smattering of Python and stuff, the two complement each other in like zooming in, zooming out, right? Like the
Hmm.
zooming in being like the computer science kind of systematic thinking, the zooming out being the philosophy part of like, okay, what does this mean and how does it fit into everything else? I just think it's interesting that you did those two things because it kind of gives you those two different perspectives on what we do and why.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that also, I don't know that it was just the philosophy classes. I mean, so much of the value to me of college is the peer learning and the conversations you have outside of class. And that's why I feel bad for folks, during COVID that did more of their classes from their dorm rooms. They were paying full freight and living in their dorm, or but not getting that sort of additional education. But certainly a lot of the philosophy students who I met, were you know I think very sort of impactful in terms of like the greater sort of political and social needs. And it wasn't just those folks. I mean, I think Madison was definitely a very politically active town, and so you learned about various issues. Certainly, like I didn't really know much about apartheid, until I went to college, and what the sort of the history was. And anyway, so I think probably more my peers that sort of influenced my direction, and helped me sort of focus my career in trying to make the world a better place.
Let me ask you about this. Like, so you went to undergrad at University of Wisconsin and law school, and
Yeah.
so I'm curious as to what that was like because coming from the big city going to Wisconsin, like what was that change like for you?
It was interesting. I mean, I think there were a number of folks that I was in a dorm with. The university dorms were limited, and so if you're out of state, you basically didn't get one of the university dorms. So they had a bunch of private dorms. So I was in a private dorm, and that meant that not everybody was from out of state, but a lot of the folks were from out of state. And so I ended up meeting a number of folks from New York City, um, and and some of them, yeah, left. I mean, it was too big of a change. But I don't know. For whatever reason, it worked for me. I loved biking and skateboarding, and so I could do that there, and I could do it for most of the winter. It was. I mean, people, again, seemed very friendly. They couldn't believe I was from New York because I didn't sound like it. Again, the TV accents, yeah. So it worked, and it was a real. I mean, it was both a small city and a real campus. And I knew I wanted to get away from the East Coast. I knew I wanted to sort of get a different sort of take on our culture. I had family in Ohio. I'd spent a little time there as a kid, and so I had the concept of the Midwest, even if I didn't really understand it much.
So I want to jump ahead a little bit to your initial career steps and path, because of all the different choices that you could have made. Like you went into legal services, and I guess let me just ask you that question: is how did that happen? Like from all of the different options, especially with what you're describing as the background that you had, the education that you've had. How did that come up?
I insinuated myself into a poli sci class as an undergrad that got me into an internship, or allowed me to apply for an internship in the state capitol, and that ultimately led to me working in the legislature and for a member of Congress for a period of time. And I think it was that was again sort of part of my journey into policy, constituent service. Working in a state legislative office, you're doing intakes all the time. We didn't call it that, but people would write or call. I don't know that they would ever fax, but they certainly didn't email at the time. With their concerns, or you would read the local papers for the district and look for letters to the editor and people who were having issues and try to identify things that needed to be addressed. And I really liked that. I really liked, again, learning about what their issues were, connecting when I was in the state legislature, connecting with, federal elected officials, staff members, if it was a federal issue. So that sort of problem solving, and then working on, in a small way, working on legislation and helping do some of the research and working with the Legislative Reference Bureau and some of the drafting work that they did. I loved it. And I was, trying to think about what I would do next. And I was just very fortunate to have some mentors that helped me. I was wrestling with, basically helped me decide to go to law school. I was wrestling with getting a degree in public policy or public administration and the law degree. And actually one of my professors, Elena Meyer, who was a lawyer, was a professor, and a lobbyist, doing all kinds of amazing, very, very publicly, public interest minded work. I think she really helped cement sort of that law, get a law degree, and you can do all these various things with it, and whether you should be able to do it or not is a question for another time. But, it is an entree to doing other sorts of work. So that I already knew going into law school, and that's significantly why I went to Wisconsin, because I had gotten my residency, that I wanted to get into public interest. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I knew if I went to Wisconsin as an in-state resident and I worked part-time, I could come out of law school with very little additional debt. And I knew that was a crippling limitation for many folks who wanted to go do something interesting, something fun with their law degree. Anyway, that led to the clinics, going to public interest law conferences, and then ultimately moving to Indiana to work in legal services in Indiana.
And so after a few different moves where you were working at Indiana Legal Services and then Illinois Legal Aid, you ended up at Legal Services NYC as a chief information officer, and you worked there for 13 years.
Yeah.
First off, like the perfect foundation for what you're doing now, and also for what bodes for the future for all law firms and all lawyers that
Hmm.
this is becoming essential to what we do. It's not just a nice to have. It's not just part of an infrastructure. Really, it seems like in some ways that you know, especially with AI, that it's kind of like subsuming the whole end to end of the services we provide.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
Obviously, the history of legal services that, yeah, and the history I've learned from colleagues who were more senior than myself when I got into it. I think there's the challenge in legal services, and the delivery and access to legal services and the delivery that some of these challenges have been perennial, and some of them are addressable, and in some cases they have been addressed. And then there's sort of the broader sort of legal, not just the nonprofit legal services, but the broader legal services community and the challenges around limited access to lawyers and the high cost of lawyers that may limit like business development, may limit people's lives personally in all sorts of ways. I certainly think the law needs to be, before AI, needs to be made a heck of a lot more efficient, right? And it starts certainly with the legislation. It starts with the rules, the court rules. We've got a very arcane system, and we've got too many systems. The way it's built, and what it takes to navigate, it makes sense that it's a much sought after service at a price that's too high. For the folks who provide free legal assistance, there's just not nearly enough funding. I don't think that there's never been. I doubt there ever will be. And so if you believe that the system in some fundamental ways is designed to be inefficient, inaccessible, unaffordable, then you really have to pretty radically change that to fix it. And ideally that's what we would do, right? We would look at sort of how do we, not just with technology, but how do we make the courts much more accessible? How do we again change the language so that it's accessible to more people? I don't put a lot of hope in that anytime soon. So I think it is now sort of this huge opportunity with AI, and I think there have been other opportunities like with call center technology, for instance, to dramatically improve our efficiency, improve our reach across language barriers, and really multiply our impact. And I think that's true for private, for-profit law firms, and certainly for nonprofit firms. I think one of the things that I think keenly aware of is, and many times to my frustration, is the cultural barriers to changing a lot of what goes on in the practice, certainly with the courts, with law schools. Not all law schools. I think I think we both can point to some law schools that are real innovators, and then with the providers themselves. And I wonder about again sort of the personalities that are attracted by and large to the law, whether that personality type is by their very nature more conservative, more risk adverse, more of a scarcity mindset than an abundance mindset. Like, how do we actually kind of make this available to everybody? And so that may be holding us back. And we've certainly seen the effects of how the law impacts. Talking specifically about nonprofit legal services, the law really negatively impacts our client communities, and so we really want to avoid being a cause of harm to them, any further harm, right? It's not quite the Hippocratic Oath, but we want to be super confident that whatever we're doing is going to make things better. And I think that's a pretty tall order. And if you're going to innovate, it's kind of difficult to not sort of look at managing some of that risk, like taking some risks, doing some maybe doing some extra work to ensure, like for instance, if you're doing a pilot, you ensure that clients who are a part of that pilot have an out, or have an option to use, or to get in line maybe for some older approach to services, and maybe give our clients more agency to make those decisions, to understand what the risks are, but to proceed. give them that the same contracting and kind of the right to contract or the right to make decisions that I think we all believe in.
Yeah, definitely people should be given the right to choose what they want and not have those choices made for them. I'm curious because, with Just Tech, you took the experience and expertise from working at Legal Services NYC, then through Just Tech kind of made that available more widely to other legal aid and legal services companies. Have you seen a change in the past 11 years that you've been running Just Tech in people's openness to using technology and now AI?
Yeah, no, certainly to technology, and I think part of it has been that the staff of the providers have started to really demand it with cloud technology. So I'll go back a little bit further. Making really important like GIS tools available to just about anybody. You had to keep up with your staff, and that's actually one of the things I found at Lisney was that we want to make sure that we're governing, that we're controlling sort of privacy and confidentiality of clients data and security. We really want to support the experimentation and innovation that a lot of these services that came on the market 15 maybe now like even more than that years ago could offer to legal services providers. And actually, I'm thinking of someone we both know, Satish Nori, when we were both at Lisney. This was a GIS tool that he was very interested in using for housing advocacy purposes, and I loved it immediately what he was doing. But then the other part of my brain, the CIO part, was like, okay, so who has access to that data? How do we limit the potential leakage of our client's identity, right? It's the staff that have pushed. It's the people who aren't satisfied with the status quo, and I think there's been an education of the leadership in legal aid over the last decade or so. I think conferences like the ITC conference, even the Equal Justice Conference, which we were just at. I mean, there's a lot more basic education of leadership around sort of the use of technology, the value. So I think it's sort of both the push and pull, and I also think the funders have gotten smarter about this, and they're both more supportive in terms of allowing providers to spend money on these technologies, and in some cases, asking questions about why providers aren't. That's not universal, and again, I mean, there are definitely providers in the community that I really wish there was a little bit more, sort of interest in pursuing more technology change. But there are enough out there that are, and I think the more we talk about it, share our experiences, the people maybe who are a little bit more reticent to take risks will be more comfortable. And certainly I think that's part of what I think Just Tech, what we do is to try to, again, help providers. I don't think we have any social workers or psychologists on staff, but I think it is sort of helping them understand how we can take on new tech initiatives with minimal risks. It really matters how you do technology, how you implement it. Most of the technologies are, viable, on paper or even, with the right, attorneys or paralegals using them. But as an organization, shifting the practice, it not only is a bit of a risk from a training perspective, but it can be a morale issue. It can be, a labor management issue. And other issues. It just gets really complicated, and I certainly think it's one of the things I think that makes technology adoption more expensive and more time consuming. But I don't know that we want to change it, because I don't want to take the humans out of legal services. I think the value of that human contact especially with the legal system as it is, between a legal professional and a client is so important, especially for folks who have been going through traumatic experiences in their life, and they just need that human connection. But anyway, we may get to some of the other issues around AI and sort of the human part of it. But yeah.
Well, absolutely. But actually, with the time we have left, I do want to ask you the couple of questions that I ask of all the guests that I've had on the show. And by the way, I completely agree that change management is probably the biggest issue right now, because there's just so much change that
Mm-hmm.
even the most progressively tech oriented amongst us are having trouble keeping up with everything. But the couple of questions I'd like to ask you, one is, you've got a lot going on. Like there's so many different interests that you're pursuing, all the legal aid organizations that you work with, and also we didn't really get into it, but you have a company, you have staff that you need to manage day to day, and
Hmm.
we all know that there's things that come up from day to day to deal with, along with everything else. So like, bottom line is like, how do you manage all of this? How do you keep it straight? How do you juggle this from day to day?
I guess if I'm being really open about this, I feel like sometimes it's harder than other times, right? For me, I think exercise is really helpful. Getting outside. One of the things I got into, I've loved tennis since I was a kid. It was the sport my parents played, and I've enjoyed it my entire life. But there was a period where I injured myself. I couldn't play, and I got into sailing and racing and little boats. And it sort of forces you to use your brain differently. So it kind of it seems very it is very simple at some level, but it's also incredibly complicated. And there's so many things to learn. And so I think the other piece besides exercise is just using your brain differently, doing something completely different. I mean, this winter was tough because there are a number of family health issues going on, but I think it's also having community and sorry, now I'm getting a little emotional, but like it's the lovely people I get to work with, um, who were so supportive. So like I think it makes it easier when you're working hard and it is intense, and at least your clients' work has people's lives on the line. Their basic health, their housing, their food, their employment. We do sort of own as much of that as we can. We appreciate sort of how important their work is, and so we feel really committed to it. But working with great people, I think at Just Tech, but really across the community, who care, they care about each other, makes a huge difference. And then I would say, again, it was something I learned when I was in college, and I had this job canvassing for the nuclear weapons freeze. There was a speaker who came in. We have, I think, each week there'd be some speaker who would help energize us. And I forget the person's name, but she said you have to turn it off at night. You have to recharge. You have to take care of yourself. I try to remember that, and even if it's just about business challenges, HR matters, whatnot, you have to turn it off, and I think that's important for the people around you. If you have family or friends, that you're not just going on and on about this stuff, and it's just not good for yourself. So I think that's how I do it. It's exercise, doing things different, having wonderful colleagues across the community that are supportive, and friends and family that are there for me.
Well, that's really great advice, and I think you may have answered my next question with what you said. But at the end of the day, after doing everything that you do, and over the years that you've done it, what makes it worthwhile for you?
Well, one piece of it is when I hear, Just Tech, right? I mean, I believe that and again, something I learned from one of my professors was that the struggle for justice is a long one, and that I'm not quoting him, Professor Jones, exactly as he said it, but the generation that comes before you hands it off to you, and that rope or that chain, and you're there to pull it forward or to reduce the backstepping, right? So we may be right now in a period where we're falling back, but what can we do to reduce the slide? And then knowing that there are wonderful people ahead of you. Sorry. That you can hand it off to. So I'm inspired by all the great people around me, and all the young folks who are taking up the cause, and all the innovators. So being a part of that continuum is very rewarding. And then I'd say within Just Tech and within legal services, it's like when I hear a compliment about one of my colleagues, that makes me feel so good. We don't get the benefit of decisions being handed out by the court, or a client saying, yeah, or keeping a client in your housing the way we did when we were working, representing clients. But hearing from the folks in the field that we're making a difference for them is worth a lot.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Tom. This is a pleasure. A lot of fun.
And I also just want to say you have, through what you do, you know, supported a lot of people and empowered them to do good in the world, as you've done yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And for everyone that's watching, if they want to keep in touch with you and learn more about yourself and Just Tech, how could they do that?
Well, yeah, I guess you can go to just-tech.com. I know we have a LinkedIn site and Facebook, but I am not a good marketer. Let's put it that way. So they can reach out certainly via LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and on Blue Sky.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I hope everyone does reach out to you, checks you out at Just Tech, and I could say that it's been a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to all of you out there, thank you so much for being a wonderful audience, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto, and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.